about 20 months into the company that we realized, oh, we can't just describe our company based on features or problems that we're solving. We have to narrow it down and say we're email marketing. First, it was for authors.
Yeah.
And that ended up not being a good market, or
Yeah.
not being a good way to describe the market we were going after.
Yeah.
But then we changed it to email marketing for professional bloggers.
Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Nathan Barry, how's it going, man?
It's going well.
Dude, I'm so excited for this conversation. Look at this. Is this fun? Does everybody see this? You see this? How long ago did you know you're going to be on the cover of SaaS Mag?
Like a month ago, I think.
Dude, this is so cool. Such a stud. Now, the big question, did they send a photographer to your spot, or did they ask you to send in some stock photos?
They asked me to send in
No!
photos.
Oh my gosh, what happened to the world of journalism? It's so bad.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember, actually, Jarrett. I met Jarrett because he was hired as a photographer for a magazine to do the shot.
Nice.
And so this was 2008, I believe. And so they were still investing in those budgets. So you paid for this photo. They didn't
Yes.
send somebody.
Well, that photo is a bit old. I was really trying to give them a photo like post beard.
Yeah.
Because I acquired the beard to try to look older.
I think it looks good on you. But
you know.
Okay, but this is old, so you weren't happy with this because...
Well, I gave them other photos.
And they said no.
They chose those photos.
Oh, they did. So
So-
that's a bit of a commentary.
Yeah.
The editorial count. I think Emily is the editor of the magazine. Anyways, 15 million ARR SaaS ConvertKit founder, creator, speaker, good dude, honorary Canadian, my words.
Oh,
So I've
well,
given
thank
you
you.
that title. So I want to chat about a lot of things. You know, we've talked many times over the past few years about growth and scale,
Yep.
some of the things you've done. What, if you had to look at like step functions of growth, ConvertKit, in regards to growth, kind of the 1 million to 2, trying to get to 10, what's the first thing that comes to mind in regards to the things that you guys did well?
Yeah, the first thing we did well was sales.
Unpack that.
Yeah, so ideally we would have done sales well from the beginning. We really had the first 18 to 24 months of not running the business well. So that's not the growth curve that you want, right? We basically launched and then got up to 2,000 MRR and then slowly bounced around there. And everything kind of changed when we started to dive into direct sales and selling, by reaching out, having a conversation. Rather than I come from the blogging world where let's sell through content, right?
Inbound.
Inbound, we should make a sales pitch there. A well-written blog post or sales page should make the sale. It doesn't. That may work at a lot bigger scale. But when you're at 2,000 in MRR, no one's heard of you. There's no brand. There's no...
Outbound. Did it feel icky? Is that why you didn't want to do it, or you
I just didn't know.
You didn't know how to do it?
Yeah. And so I kind of... I guess two things. I didn't know how to do it, and I didn't know how to reach out to people.
Got it.
So
in a way that didn't feel intrusive.
Or even who to reach out to.
Okay.
Right? Because there's everyone on the internet. Who do you serve?
Mm.
And so the first move was to really become specific about, are we building email marketing for everyone? Email marketing for people like me? How do you label that? It was about 20 months into the company that we realized, oh, we can't just describe our company based on features or problems that we're solving. We have to narrow it down and say we're email marketing. First, it was for authors.
Yeah.
And that ended up not being a good market, or
Yeah.
not being a good way to describe the market we were going after.
Yeah.
But then we changed it to email marketing for professional bloggers.
Pro bloggers, not just bloggers.
Yeah, because I wanted something aspirational in there, right? Because blogger is already a term that people think, oh, you're a blogger. That's cute.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, oh, professional.
There was a point when entrepreneur was like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah.
So with the professional blogger, it's aspirational. Someone who doesn't get it is they're professional bloggers, and so there's more curiosity there. And it feels less hobbyist.
Was that tough to go niche? Because a lot of companies struggle when they have a product like yours that can serve so many different markets. They don't want to, you're a 2K MRR. You don't want to turn people away.
So I would say that going after a specific niche it's the easiest advice to give. and it's great advice. I'd given it to people many times myself.
I've heard you give it to people. Yeah.
And it's the hardest advice to take because you're like, okay, Dan, you should focus on this niche. This is all about. Oh, for my business, no, I wouldn't want to turn away customers. It's totally different. And so it took me a long time to actually take the advice. But it ended up working out because then I could go after, okay, this is specifically who I'm trying to serve. And I can actually list these people out, right? I can start to make lists.
Create a name list, segment by industry, pro bloggers. You can kind of Google top 10 blogs for a specific,
and you can
vertical.
go really specific.
Yeah.
So like I would do things like email marketing for professional men's fashion bloggers in New York City, right? Because there's probably only 30 of them, 50 of them, right?
And was there also like this understanding that they had a need that might have been underserved because nobody, because when I think of bloggers, Tim Ferriss didn't have email marketing on his blog for a long time. I think Ramit Sethi was like, Tim, you gotta let people subscribe, right? There's almost like some of the bloggers didn't do email marketing. Is that something that was part of that decision, or?
No, a bunch of them did it. Maybe it wasn't as popular, but people like Ramit and others were popularizing it and saying like, hey, you got to do this.
Yeah.
Pat Flynn was doing the same, things like that. But it was really about trying to get to specific people that we could list out. And we didn't pick these industries because of like crazy research, and we decided, okay, professional paleo recipe bloggers who are women are the perfect market. Really, instead what we did is we looked at, okay, who's using the platform already? Because we had 100 customers or so.
So then you can create some case studies and reference.
Yeah, and so if you look at, okay, who are the 5 most successful companies using us, then what happens is if, instead of a little circle drawn just around them, what happens if we broadened it a little bit? What if we went out so it included 50 people like them or 30 people like them?
So essentially their peers.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is if you don't have any big names to drop, right? Like now, if you're like, who uses ConvertKit? We have Tim Ferriss. We have Arnold Schwarzenegger. We have Tim McGraw.
Dude, I did not know that, man. Congrats. Those are huge.
But early on, you don't have those names to drop, which is a very useful thing because people will sit back and be like, well, who uses you? And if you throw out a name, they're like, oh, okay, well, if it's good enough for Tim, it's good enough for me.
I call those Lighthouse Counts. They essentially draw people in just by their credibility.
Yeah, and so when you don't have that, if you draw that circle really, really small, then what you can do is people will say, you didn't drop a famous name, but they'll be like, oh, I know her.
Yeah.
I saw her at the conference 3 weeks ago. She uses you? And no one outside of the industry would think about that. But you're like, nope, we're just going with paleo recipe blogs, and they all know each other. And so what happened is we got up to about 5,000.
So this is interesting. So this is, you don't need to have the name brand people. You just need to be known by their peers in that space. So Pat Flynn knows Amy Porterfield, and you can get that connection there. It doesn't have, well, I mean, both of them are very, well known in their own industry, but yeah.
So if you went someone smaller by like a factor of 10, then
it works.
That would be the same idea where it works. Because what you're doing is you're creating this tiny little echo chamber.
Yeah.
So for example, in the not in the fitness space because that's massive.
Huge.
In a very small corner of the fitness world.
Yeah.
I was talking to someone.
Functional fitness.
Yes, this was they were all doing high intensity interval training. And I was talking to someone, and she's like, everyone on the entire internet is switching to ConvertKit. That's what it feels like. I'm like, okay, so
in
over
their
here,
universe.
Over here, I know that we have 5,000 in MRR. So that is objectively not
true.
At all.
Yeah.
But in their world, because they were saying, I switched, this other person switched.
Perception is reality.
Switched. And then I was talking to this person at the conference. They said they talked to you. They're thinking about it.
But what was your ACV at that point? Because, I mean, to do outbound at scale, it sounded like you were doing things that maybe wouldn't scale. Yeah, exactly. So, like, what was the process? Were you doing the outbound?
Yeah, I was doing all of it.
Okay, so Nathan's sending the emails. ACV was floating around what?
$50 a month.
Yeah.
75 a month.
Yeah. So annually, $700, $800.
Right.
So really, if you had a salesperson doing this and comping them,
terribly unprofitable.
It's not going to work. But this helps build the base of MRR, helps you focus, get the customers. And what was the email copy and what tools did you use?
Yeah. So first thing was building the list, and I do it 2 different ways. One, we use Built With. And nerdy data.
Yeah, super cool.
Scrape the web.
What were you looking for?
who's using Aweber, who's using MailChimp,
Perfect.
who's using
You knew the competitive set.
these other tools.
Yeah, you can
I knew
compete
which ones
against
were easier to sell against.
Yeah.
I knew at the time we didn't have the feature set to go against Infusionsoft, so
Yeah.
I wasn't going to do that yet. I was like, great, we'll save that for 6 months from now. And then the other side that I would do is would go the industry direction. And so Google searches, top paleo blogs. The other thing is you go start following people on Twitter, and it will give you like recommended. If you follow this person, then here's someone
you're
like
right.
that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like Twitter lists used to be
Really
used
good.
more often.
Yeah. Kind of died.
But you go make your own manual lists, and actually making the manual lists worked better than scraping the web. I found I got a higher conversion rate. I think because you're in that narrow little echo chamber. More if you scrape the web, then it's just people who use Aweber, and that's not as targeted.
Yeah. You want the industry.
Yeah, and then the email. The trick is to send a really short email. The longer the email, the more I know you copied and pasted it, and it's not personal. So I would say like, hey, Melissa, just reaching out. Or the reason I'm reaching out is I saw that you're using Aweber, and I wanted to know if there's anything in particular frustrating you about Aweber.
So you went straight for pain,
Yeah.
discovery.
The reason I ask, I run an email marketing company
Straight up.
focused on professional bloggers, and I'm trying to learn how best to improve the product.
Ooh, you went for the advice angle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Ask
Advice
for
over
advice, get a
sales.
customer.
Yeah.
That's super smart.
And that's the whole email.
Yeah.
Right? It's, what was that, 3 sentences?
Yeah.
Maybe up to 4 sentences.
And then they at least reply and say, well, I hate this part of the product.
Yeah. And so, like, when MailChimp is the most common, obviously, because they're the biggest. When I would email people from that side, they would come back and they'd list out, oh, I can't tag my customers. It's really hard to do, like, a content upgrade or a lead magnet. And from there, it'd be easy to say, well, that's exactly why I started ConvertKit, because I used MailChimp, and I had those exact problems, because everyone had the exact same problems. As far as customer research, sometimes I would learn new things, but really it was the same 5 things over and over again. And so then I'd try to go from there to a call. Hey, let's talk through it. Happy to show you some workarounds for how to pull off some of that in MailChimp if you want.
Yeah.
But also I'd love to show you what I'm building, because it's designed for this exact need.
And what, you ran like a product demo, or was it just like an ad hoc call? Did you have a structure to it, or?
Yeah, it was a product demo.
Yeah.
And then asking them more of their process and workflow.
And how long did it take you to get to a point where somebody else could do that for you? The outbound, or was
quite
it
a
always
while.
Nathan?
It was me for a long time.
Okay. And when you hired
2
somebody,
years
did you
maybe.
still do the initial outreach as Nathan, or did they do it?
They did it as themselves.
Okay.
Though as we started to hire people, like sales is one of the last roles that I hired for. We had a lot more inbound coming later on. This isn't something that we necessarily did in a scalable way as someone pretending to be me or anything like that. But one thing on the demo, I think people spend too much time talking themselves. And if you could record a demo and then even just make note of how much time did they spend talking versus you spend talking.
That's it. That one data point.
I think it's so important, because if it's like 80% you talking, then your message is not being received. Like, I think one of the most effective things is for you to ask a question and then them talk for a while and talk themselves into using your product. Because that's usually where it comes to on the frustration side.
And so you did that for a while. So is that something you guys still do today, or that's kind of?
We don't really do as much outbound in that way. Most of the outbound that we do is to try to get these massive top tier accounts.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of
More account-based marketing.
go
ABM,
hop on a plane, host a dinner in LA,
invite
go
these
to a conference.
influencers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So still part of the strategy. So that got you from like the 2K to, 20, I'm assuming 25K MRR
Yeah.
and onward.
Yep. So there's 2 important things there. One is that was actually the demo process was actually terribly ineffective, because we'd get on this call, talk through it, they'd be like, oh, this makes sense, and then there'd be this moment where they'd pause and you could tell they're thinking about something, and they're like, yeah, actually,
Switching
I
costs?
love what you're doing, but I'm not going to switch.
Yeah.
It's too difficult. And, in sales and in life, like if you ask me to do something, hey, will you buy this product? Will you whatever else? I have to give you an answer. I'm socially obligated to give you an answer. If you're trying to sell to me through a website or a video or whatever else, I just hit the back button.
Yeah.
But I can't do the in-person equivalent of it, of like backing away slowly and like getting up and leaving.
Yeah.
Like I have to answer.
Yeah.
And if I answer, I can't just say, no, Dan, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I have to give a reason.
Yeah.
And so people would pick the reason of switching costs. And I like to imagine someone like if that's the reason that, and that's the door and they're leaning up against it and they're like, oh, so you can't go through. And so if you, like all the possible objections, they picked that and that's what it's stacking up against. And so if you take that away, they like kind of just fall through the door and they're like, they don't have a choice but to sign up. And so what I would do is, well, first I try to say, oh, it's not that much work, blah, blah, blah. Not compelling at all.
Yeah.
What was compelling is saying, I'll do it for you for free.
Wow.
And so here you have a $50 a month account. And I'm like, okay, I'll take, like, give me your WordPress login, give me your MailChimp login. Let me export all your subscribers. Let me recreate all your forms to match the look on your site.
Did you analyze their account before you offered that to make sure? No, just.
No, because, okay, let's go back for a second to the idea of word of mouth. If you ask, I don't know, making something up, 50, 80% of founders, how did you go? Oh, word of mouth. Great word of mouth. And as a founder, you're like, oh, that makes sense. Like, great, I'll just grow through word of mouth. And you're like, wait, that is the most frustrating advice to ever hear, because what do you do with that?
Yeah, what is word of mouth?
You don't even have any customers who can talk about you, who can share, like, to tell other people. And so when you're doing $1,000 a month, that is the most obnoxious advice to hear. But what you realize is that's where you have to put this level of sales and hustle and basically do anything possible to get the right customer, because then you'll start to get that momentum. And so
it's almost an offering that you created something that they went like, wow, that's amazing that he would do that.
Right.
And they talk about it because it's just like, it's like 50. It's almost like ridiculous that they're like, man, for $50 a month, you really like, I wouldn't do that. Because that's what I'm thinking to myself when you're like, oh, I'll just switch you and we'll take care of it. I'm like, you can't be making money. Right.
And that's the thing, is that you don't have to make money, right? Because we're working towards MRR. MRR compounds. We're working towards word of mouth, and word of mouth compounds. So you have both of those factors. And this is horribly unprofitable until 10,000 MRR, 20,000 MRR, somewhere in there. But unless you have a big audience coming in or some other partnership, you're not going to get to 20,000 MRR without something like this. Like,
got it.
Your 10% monthly growth on $500 of MRR, like, it's
how
not
many
gonna
accounts
get
do you think you guys got because of that strategy, the outbound?
At least 300, 400.
So 300, and then I know we've talked a lot about affiliates, partners, the long tail distribution of that. How did you ramp that up meaningfully and unpack that strategy?
Yeah, so that was the next phase.
Yeah.
So we got to about 20,000 in MRR. So say in December 2014, we were at 2,000 a month. 6 months later, we were at maybe 7,000 a month by that September. So 9-10 months later, we're at 22,000 a month. And that's where, like, we're actually starting to notice that word of mouth is coming in. Every sale that we make is making the next sale easier. And it might be 1% easier, but you notice that, like, oh,
you feel that momentum
that wasn't
building.
as hard as it used to be. The other thing is, being in the blogger space, the nice thing about it is if we go to the Chamber of Commerce or something like that, where and I sell a couple people on being customers, and they're really happy, they might tell 2 or 3 of their friends, in the general small business space. In blogging, if Pat Flint's happy, he's going to tell 10,000 of his closest friends, right? And there's momentum there, like, oh, that's interesting. And so a few big blogs signed up.
Again, that wasn't strategic thinking at the beginning, which is fascinating, because it's like, sometimes I feel like in hindsight, it's easy for us to be like, oh, I did it because of these reasons, success theater. But in reality, it was literally, sometimes it's just luck.
Yeah, we didn't pick that.
Yeah, you didn't like, okay, here's the 15 niches. We'll pick this one because they have an audience and they have a propensity for sharing.
Right.
But turned out to be an awesome thing.
Yeah, it ended up working out really well. So we had these 2 accounts that signed up when we were about 10, 12,000 MRR. So it was Pat Flynn, and he wasn't going to talk about it, but he was trying it out and seeing how this works. And then the other one was a blog called Wellness Mama, which when I first met them, we were at a conference, and it was one of those, oh, what's your blog on that? And
You're like, oh, that's cute.
they said Wellness Mama. I was like, oh, let me type it in. I started typing it into Google, and I typed wellness, and it auto-completed to Wellness Mama. And the last company I worked for was in like the health insurance and hospitals, wellness, all that. And I knew how much they cared about the term wellness, and I was like, okay, this must be a big blog.
Yeah, for Google to do an auto suggest on
When
the
I'd
term
never-
wellness. Yeah, you'd never been to anything similar. It was just like,
So we got them, and we got Pat actually on the same day. So that was a very nice. We went from 10,000 in MRR to 15,000 in MRR in a single day because
wow.
them and another account signed up at the same time. But then by like September, October, they were onboarded, things were going well, and they started to talk about it. And that's when all of this kicked off. And like, we're at 20,000, and then we jumped, I think we grew like 60.
Did you guys
70%.
formalize that conversation with them? Is that how the
Right.
partnership or affiliate program started?
That's right when we started to launch the affiliate program. So those first accounts, Pat started, he would go live on Periscope at like weird times. Like we did it once at 1 a.m. I think the first time that he did it.
Yeah.
And we got like 6 people that signed up just from that. And from him doing a short live Periscope at 1 a.m. and all these people were like, wait, what are you using? What's this new tool? And then we're like, okay, let's make an official affiliate program, and kind of go from there. And then people started sharing a lot. And so
What was the original conversation with a Pat or a Wellness Mama blog to become an affiliate? Like, obviously they got to use the product, they got to love it, but like, was there a different rev share with them? Was there an understanding of marketing calendar? Kind of like, what was the early days versus what does it look like today?
yeah, the early days it was very informal. It's always been the same rev share. I've always taken the approach, and because I'm transparent with every number in business that
If people didn't know this, you put all your financial numbers publicly on the internet. Barometrics, ConvertKit, search it. You can see everything. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and I never wanted to make a deal where I'm giving somebody a free account. There's any of these other things like you have a 20% commission, but you get 30%.
Okay, so your idea is that if somebody saw what everybody paid publicly, you'd feel good about it because it didn't show any.
Yeah, because it doesn't show favoritism.
Yeah,
and quite honestly, bloggers are used to getting stuff for free.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll do this. I'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, if my whole market is bloggers, then I can't really do that.
Yeah.
And then you don't want to have the conversation like, well, you're actually not a famous enough blogger.
Yeah. Nobody knows you enough.
That doesn't
You're not as
go over
notable.
well.
Yeah, they don't like that at all.
So as we kicked off this affiliate program, we did a 30% recurring commission. Actually, the reason we picked that number was because that's what Aweber did.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, great, let's do that. And Aweber, it's kind of odd to think about it now. Aweber was the biggest competition. The biggest, like MailChimp's way bigger, but the most direct competition.
Yeah, the one that the bloggers were using.
Yeah.
Because it was, for the most part, were they free in the early days?
I don't think Aweber ever
They
had a
never
free
were
plan.
free, eh? But they were definitely cheaper.
Yeah, and I'd come across people who had a grandfathered account from 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was like,
$9 a month,
I
19
can't
bucks a
compete on
month.
that
Yeah,
price.
it's like, you could stay with Aweber. We'll never.
Yeah. But then sometimes people would come back like 6 months later and be like, if you're more of my friends switched and I make enough money from email that I'm going to give up my grandfather price with Aweber and come over.
That's awesome.
But we closed out that year on the principles of direct sales and then going into affiliates. We closed out that year at 98,000 in MRR. So we went from 2,000.
Crack the million ARR level.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you went from 2,000 to 90,000 in 1 year.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's some great growth.
Yeah.
What were
it
you?
was crazy.
You were Inc. 500 this year. What number were you? Inc. 500. Yeah.
70, 72, 73.
And like one of the top in software.
Yeah, we were number 8 in all of software.
That's great.
Number 1 in Idaho,
Yeah,
which
I love that one.
you would think that that's not a competitive market.
Yeah.
It's absurdly competitive because ClickFunnels is in our
Yeah.
space.
That's
And they grew. They had higher revenue than we did.
Yeah.
We had a lower starting point. It's all about.
That's always about where you
percentage.
start. Yeah, percent growth. It's like how low can I start and how fast can I
Well, still being
amplify?
the other-
Yeah, let's sandbag a little bit up front, just ready to let the floodgates go.
Yeah.
We need to make the list. But affiliates for you, that began it. But really, I feel like, I think one time you said it was a third of your marketing channel, and probably still is today. And one of the things that I loved, you're an incredible operator and thoughtful about team and structure more than just like, I think a lot of people get in software and they want to raise a bunch of money, and it's almost like they want to play entrepreneur more than they actually want to build a great product or build a great team.
Yep.
And that's, one thing that I saw, and I remember meeting the gal you had hired to essentially backfill the partner program, meaning that you assigned a person to own it, to run it, to fly out. And that was one thing that I always thought was really smart, was that you invest in her going to meeting face to face.
Right.
I don't know, twice a year, once a year with your top partners to have conversations. And you were telling me most of their other affiliates, they've never met anybody at the company that they promote. So how does it look like today in regards to like how you've operationalized it, how you look at it as a channel?
Yeah, so we hired someone on our team. Her name's Alexis. She came on pretty young and relatively inexperienced, but it was one of those things where I met her at a conference, and the way she connected with people, all that, I was like, okay, there's something here. She didn't have a reputation or things like that. So if she emailed somebody cold, they would, may not have taken it. But that's where I realized, like, oh, I can invest in her brand and build that up. And I've done that as well with Isa, who we have teach our webinars of the same sort of thing, where like, very deliberately, you don't want anyone to feel like, oh, I was going to have Nathan teach the webinar, or Nathan was going to be the one to fly out, but then I got dumped off on somebody else.
Yeah.
So I'm actually very deliberate about building the brands of the people on my team.
Yeah.
So like, it's not an accident that when Isa teaches a webinar with Pat Flynn, there's photos on Instagram of them hanging out and that kind of thing. So then when the next person is
so that's interesting. So you actually, the flying people out there is to actually build the relationship with that person and the influencer.
And the brand
of the person.
Because I want someone taking the meeting from Alexis and being like, oh, I saw on Instagram, Pat just posted, I saw you guys were hanging out last week. Melissa Griffin, I saw, she posted about how Alexis came out and spent a day just like helping her redesign all of her funnels and like plan her content calendar and stuff like that.
That's amazing.
So it's a level of investment. And I think people, I guess it's a way of investing in employees.
Well, it gets you leverage.
Exactly. Because if I can walk in and someone thinks of them as on my level, and I actually think Clay Collins did a good job. Did a great job with Tim, where he would actually say, and the line that he would use is, "Oh, you don't actually want me to teach the webinar because Tim's webinars convert better than mine."
Oh, geez. As soon as you say that, it's like, no, I want the lower converting one with you. It's like, thank you for, that's brilliant.
So you have to do that, right? Because if you build a brand based on a personality, then that's going to stop working. Like it won't scale.
Yeah.
And so just have a system for, I guess this would be Laura Roeder's term, have a system for creating fame for your team members.
And so you got one strategy that was, well, I mean, it sounds like the same part of the same thing is you had people that are affiliates that are essentially just promoting you, but then you also did the webinar. How was that part of being a certain level of partner where there was an agreement that there was a webinar that they promoted to their list? You, I believe, did the same webinar for each partner because you knew that it added a ton of value and that obviously it converted well. How did you promote that? So obviously affiliates link on their website, blah, blah, blah. That's cool. Right. But doing the webinar, it's a bigger ask. They're going to promote it to their list. How did you kind of build up that program? Did you do a bunch of the first webinars and then transition it over?
Yeah. So the first problem that you have running an affiliate program, there's kind of two. One, if you just open it up, then whoever shows up.
Yeah, like a ClickBank. That to me is affiliate. The other one, when somebody's that's partner. That's like, hey, we're gonna agree to coexist and promote each other. Like there's a
because the first people you get in the door, they're useless. Yeah. I remember Chris Guillebeau told me once. He was like, "Do you know the 80-20 rule?" And I was like, "Yeah." He says, "In affiliates, it's a 98-2 rule." And you would think it's like, oh, 98%.
Can't be that much.
He's like, 98% comes from 2%, and or 2% of the people. I was like, that? And he goes, no. The 98-2 rule with affiliates is that only 2% of your affiliates will ever make a single sale.
Anything.
Like, because all these people sign up, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to drop a link on a website. Yeah. And it never works. So you actually have to apply direct sales like the first lesson we learned in the business to affiliates.
Oh, got it.
Because then if you're really proactive, then you go get those dream partners and put in that level of work. And now you're immediately going to run into the next problem, which is in SaaS, if people can buy at any time, they'll put it off basically forever.
Yeah. Why would they do it on the webinar?
There's no urgency.
Yeah.
And so webinars are interesting because they create an event.
Yeah.
Right, where now there's a reason for Pat or Melissa or whoever to promote ConvertKit now instead of just a link on a resources page and email their list and bring people to it. And then it also gives us the opportunity to put urgency on the back end of, sign up live on the webinar or sign up within 48 hours.
Yeah, add some extra add-ons or
get this free course
scarcity.
as well.
And what's your offer today that works really well?
Yeah, so our offer today is a free trial.
Okay. So right now you go direct, you don't get a free trial.
Well, so you do. You get a 14-day free trial.
Now you get a 30-day.
You get a 30. So on the webinar, you get a 30-day free trial and additional bonuses. So
and what are those? Yeah.
We have 2 courses, and then
what are the courses? A Facebook course or
one is a book that I wrote called Authority.
Yeah. That's how you got into this whole thing.
Right.
Yeah. Super
yeah.
cool.
And so that one's done really well, and a lot of people have built brands on that one. So it has a good reputation.
Yep.
And it's sold for like $100, and so
the real value.
That in.
Yeah.
And then, what? So what's interesting now? I'm trying to think about what the offers are, and like this is a little bit of a commentary for me on the business. I don't actually know.
But I mean,
separate from
no,
that
and
now.
I mean that's I think it's a compliment to you as a leader. I mean, I think sometimes people think you're supposed to know everything, and like for me, I have incredible people that support me, and I think if anybody got to see behind the scenes, they'd go like, "Man, Dan is either dumb or lazy." Because
right.
because I mean that's just. But I think that's what leaders are supposed to do is really just empower people to make decisions and guide them. So like the fact that you don't know the offer doesn't matter. I'm sure you know that they're converting.
Yep.
Which is the primary metric. So
I know the number of trials.
Yeah, I'm going to measure the outcome, not necessarily the tactic, because that's independent of them achieving goals and for the business. But I'm just curious because I think a lot of SaaS founders want to do a webinar. They don't know how to sell from a stage, a digital stage or physical stage. And I think, what you've done, and I reference you guys all the time for webinars, you and Clay and a few others, is, you ask yourself, well, what does the client need to be uber successful? They're going to buy our product. They're going to use our software. If we had to move up a level and say, like, what tool, what information, what, and even other tools. Like I think it was on Lead Pages or others. They offered like it was Lewis Howes. It was like a 90 days WebEx because he was teaching webinars. So it's like, if you don't have a webinar tool, I'll get you 90 days for free. So it's even just thinking about like, how do I package things that are going to help my customer be more successful? Templates, that kind of stuff. Maybe, this before when you were doing the converting people, that would have been an incredible thing to add to the offer because people would definitely want this. Like, he's never going to make any money with this, but let's do it now. So that's cool. So the webinars with certain partners and use a direct sales process to essentially reach out, build relationship, invest in having somebody fly over, connect with them, add value, which is cool. I never even thought of that because they're connecting with all the different other partners, so they're seeing patterns, so they can actually provide a consultative sale and a value add.
Well, and the other thing is they approach it from a year-long perspective. How should we work together in 2019, in 2020? What's your content calendar? Oh, you don't have a content calendar? Okay, all right, forget ConvertKit for a second. What if we sat down and made a content calendar for your business right now? And you can ask questions and all of that, and then help the affiliate shape that because they've been thinking about it from, all the big people have thought through this, but that mid-tier who have 50,000 people on their email list, a lot of great fans, they're still a little bit on the treadmill, a little too down.
Yeah, they're not proactive yearly scheduling. They're just
And so then if you, this is what Alexis does so well, is she comes in and says, okay, let's look at it from a year-long perspective. What's the promo here? When do you want to launch your course? When do you want to do this other thing? And she's very upfront about, great, and let's promote ConvertKit here, there.
So essentially, here's the gaps. This is a great time after you do your course. Let's do a ConvertKit. Let's do another one for you, another one for a partner.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so then she works that in, and they walk away and go, whoa, my business is set up. I have the spots where additional revenue from ConvertKit is going to come in as an affiliate.
And do you sell the partners on an EPC or some kind of estimated, earnings per click or some kind of revenue?
Not really.
No, they don't care. Or is it like
I think it's one of those things. So what's interesting is they really tend to like the recurring revenue. In the blogger space, it's easy to sell, an ebook, things like that. You get your $50,000 spike from a launch, but like even $1,000 or $2,000 a month of recurring, that's pretty interesting. And they think of it as, okay, well, with this first little promo, let's just I just want to cancel out my car payment. Now I want to cancel out my house payment. And you get to that point.
Now I want to buy a new car.
Right. And that's the kind of thing where it's actually really compelling. So the numbers tend to be small, or they're not big enough that you would like brag about that. I made
because when they're affiliate for somebody selling a $2,000 product and they're making 50%, the numbers might be bigger for the same level of effort.
Yep.
But for you, it's like it's the reoccurring. So it may not be up front, but it's saying, hey, the way I say it is you can be in SaaS without having to build SaaS.
Yeah.
It's kind of pretty compelling because if anybody's tried to build a tool or software, they understand this. There's obviously a lot of friction there. So that brings you. So we start with the direct outbound sales and the partner stuff. What do you guys do today that you feel is kind of moving the needle for you guys at scale at 15 million ARR?
Yeah.
What are you doing to get to 50?
Continuing on outbound. We're actually kind of revisiting outbound in a different way. We're doing it in much more of, I guess, with Nike as our model in that sense, right?
Okay.
We have all these aspirational people, right? And so Nike is going out and getting these athletes. These athletes are inspiring the individuals, the weekend warrior type, and then those are taking it all the way through to the general population. So they build a brand in that way.
Is that where the conference comes in? Craft and Commerce?
The conference is part of that.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you want to meet people, if you just fly them out to speak, that's a great way.
You got a platform.
That's one of those things where you're like, I'd love to get to know Seth Godin better. Oh, well, let's have him come out and speak. And like, all of a sudden you can talk to him or these other people, Mark Manson, Casey Neistat. We have them out to speak at the conference. So I would say we do the outbound on a much higher level. Who are the names that set the boundaries of what we mean by a creator? Because we've moved from email marketing for bloggers to email marketing for creators. So that's why we're pulling in Tim McGraw and we have these other people.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole audience that we're going after, all creators. And so we're looking for those people that will really set the brand rather than the specific revenue from it. In the same way that Nike would be like, oh, this is the athlete that we want to get. Because that sets the direction. They don't care about the revenue from the athlete. In fact, they're like, here's $50 million. Here's $20 million. And luckily we don't have to pay them at that point. But it would be interesting to think about, like at what level athletes. Who are those people? Because that's where we want to go.
What like the way you do inbound or content, what do you measure? How do you think about it? Is it, do you have a CAC attributed to that in regards to investing in content?
Yeah, we measure things based on leads and then the conversion rate for those leads. So inbound is pretty big for us. We've done a big content play, and now the search results are starting to pay off for that.
Do you have somebody dedicated to just inbound?
Yeah, so we have someone doing inbound sales, so the demo requests, and that kind of thing. And then we have someone else dedicated to the search rankings, and then our marketing team is kind of multifunctional. We've got a copywriter, webinar producer, general all-around growth marketer, a designer, a developer. And so we try to give them all their own resources.
Yeah,
so
like a growth team.
Yeah, if they have an idea, they can execute on it start to finish.
But you don't have do you have certain keywords that you want to rank for and produce content?
All right,
so they're doing kind of like a performance SEO. I think a lot of people produce content, but it's actually not. It's not measurable.
Right.
John Moreau, who's a brilliant content marketer, he talks about kind of like a lot of SaaS companies should focus on kind of middle and bottom funnel content because that's really, if you've got the traffic, that's the kind of content that's going to help them make a decision better. So economically, it makes sense versus just top of funnel awareness. But I have, some clients that are very deliberate, kind of year 3, year 5, where they're like, hey, I'm going to double down on content, but I'm going to go after these keywords because I know what I'm paying in ad spend. So if I can, swap that out and have it organic, just takes a while. Is there a certain content format that you're liking, that you're thinking about? And how do you, I mean, when inbound is table stakes, par for the course, how do you stand out?
Yeah, so we thought about that a lot. We had a blog. There's nothing interesting about the blog. We didn't have a unique angle. The content marketing that we did well was the stuff that I was putting out on my blog or telling the story of growing ConvertKit, because we were so transparent, because people were like, wait, you're a distributed team? There were these things that didn't make sense. And so, we get attention and brand for that type of content.
Yeah.
And that was good for recruiting. And it definitely helped with customers, but it's not like the startup space isn't really our audience.
Yeah.
But then everything on our blog just wasn't that effective. And so we said, okay, what if we did something totally different that we don't see other people doing? And so we came out with an online magazine that we called Tradecraft. And so we said, we're going to do one issue a month. And we're actually just going to do 24 issues. So this is a 2-year commitment that we're making.
Yeah.
Because we can get the quality dialed in, cover every topic that a blogger creator needs in order to be effective at this. So we have like Design for Non-Designers is an entire issue of our magazine. And so we produced 24 of those over one a month. They drop on the same day. So it's like Tradecraft is out today, Netflix style.
Yeah.
And we were able to do a launch every month for our content rather than be like, here's a new weekly blog post.
Yeah.
And it worked really well. And now that that's concluded, we're realizing.
Are you the primary advertiser of the magazine? Just like, I was
go.
like, oh, who made this magazine? Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no advertising in it or anything like that.
Yeah. It does say ConvertKit somewhere.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's branded.
Okay.
There's no outside advertising.
Okay.
But as we go back now, we don't need to keep creating more content. We have plenty of content on the site. So now we're going back and systematically rewriting and improving Tradecraft, saying, oh, this article did well.
Okay, so you repurpose. That was my question. You repurpose the content from the magazine, but you don't write the blog post, then grab the blog post, put it in the magazine. You've created the.
So it's the same.
Yeah.
Like if you went to it, you can find one of these individual articles as a blog post on the site.
But it only comes out after the issue's been published.
Yeah.
Okay, and do you guys, I guess since you publish it digitally, it's available, the whole article's on there.
Yeah, it's all just published digitally.
Yeah, but so you still get the SEO benefit.
Yep.
But
and so now we look back at, okay, which ones are starting to rank, and we go and rework them, flush them out.
Put some lead magnets.
Yep, build them out more. Because so much of SEO now is saying, okay, that was an okay article, now let's go make it the best article for this on the topic. And so that's where we're like, we don't need another 100 articles published. Instead we need to go make these 20, just incredible and build more links for them.
As we wrap up, Nathan, because I want to be sensitive of your time, one question I love to ask founders is, who did you need to become to still be the CEO of this growing SaaS company?
Oh, that's a good question. The last couple of years has been maybe 2 different journeys that I've been on. One is like the company journey. Certainly the other is like the personal, emotional journey of like understanding who I am and who I want to be. Probably I think the best thing that founders could do, and it's very inexpensive for the return, is go to counseling. Like going to a counselor and talking through the things in your life, what's going on, your relationships, having that time, say once a month or every 2 weeks, where like, wait, for an hour, I'm actually just going to think about these things that it's always noise in the background, and you're actually going to clear it out and say, we're just going to focus on this. So I actually went to this leadership event. It was billed as a leadership training event. It's called Reboot. It's put on by a former famous venture capitalist named Jerry Colonna.
Yeah, dude is amazing.
Yeah, it's so good.
He's got a superpower of making people cry.
Yes, he does.
He's so good.
He's done it to me.
Yeah.
So I showed up for this weekend event. It's a leadership training event for CEOs, and they kick it off immediately. There's 15 people in the room. I thought I was kind of a hot shot. As people did introductions, it was like, oh shit, he's okay. He does run $1 billion company. Interesting.
Yeah.
But there was that, and they said, okay, we told you that, like, we sold it to you that you came here because it wasn't cheap to be there, that we're going to teach you how to be a better leader. Sorry, we lied. We're not going to spend a minute on that. And everyone's like,
They got you.
what? Okay. And like, we're going to spend the entire weekend on helping you better understand yourself. And then who knows where that will go from there. It might have an impact in your relationships, in your leadership ability, in your team, but we'll see. And it was transformational of like spending that time understanding, like, why do you do what you do? When someone is spending too much money in the business, right? They don't care about the budgets. They're like, oh, I need more money to do this. Why do I always have such a strong visceral reaction to it? You know, turns out it usually comes back to
like childhood. Crazy.
Surprise.
Everything.
And so digging into those things, and over the last year, not just my leadership team, but the whole company is like, you're a different person based on this journey that you've been on over the last 18 months. And it's been so powerful.
Nathan, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you, bro. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Look forward to watching the journey continue to grow, and congrats again for being on the cover. We'll talk soon, bro.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thanks for watching this episode of Escape Velocity. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment with your biggest insight from our conversation. Be sure to check out the next episode.